All right. So we have two amazing speakers, experts that are going to come up and talk to us. We're going to have a discussion that, sometimes you have to have talks that aren't comfortable, but we have to have them. Okay. So I would like to call to the stage. Please, I asked how to pronounce her last name. Please forgive me if I don't say it right. Alex Espetia. I'm messing it up. Alex, can you come to the stage? And you're going to tell me, Alex, tell me how to pronounce your name again.
Espetia.
Alex Espetia. Can we give her a round of applause? Have a seat, please. And next, we'd like to call to the stage Heather Bonner. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have these ladies introduce themselves. They're going to tell you a little bit about what they do, how they do it, why they do it. And then after, we're going to have open discussion. We'd like to have questions. We want you to know this is a safe space. You can ask a question. Don't think any question is dumb or not important or irrelevant. This is what we're here for, because a question you have might be a question that someone else has. Okay, so Alex, if you want to start, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in your organization.
How about now? All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone had a really good lunch. I know I really enjoyed mine. So my name is Alexandra Espetia. I typically go by Alex. I'm the Community Education Outreach Team Lead for the Kellum Foundation over in the Guilford County and Greater Greensboro area. Hey, so I see a couple familiar faces. My role for Kellum focuses mostly on doing community education outreach, just like my title suggests. I do the majority of our outreach events. I go out, talk about mental health. The real bulk of my work is around community education, so providing evidence-based, accurate information for folks to make changes in their day-to-day lives. Part of that is what we're going to be talking about today, suicide prevention. So kind of challenging people's perspectives on suicide, their understanding of what suicide is, the causes, who is affected by suicide, and just challenging folks to kind of reframe their mind around suicide and not be so hesitant to have a conversation, especially with a loved one, if you have like a gut feeling that something may be going on underneath the surface. But yeah.
Okay. Let me ask a question. Like I said earlier, sometimes conversations are hard to have and hard to start. How do you suggest that if a parent has a suspicion that maybe something's going on with their child, what's a way that you suggest that you start the conversation?
So it can be a little intimidating to have this conversation. I think everyone can kind of have that feeling. First and foremost, you don't want to start right off the gate asking someone, are you thinking about suicide right off the bat? No lead up to it. You want to just engage in a regular conversation. If you notice your child maybe has some concerning behaviors and you're like, hey, what's going on? How has your day been? Or if you notice some significant behavioral changes and you just want to check in and like, how are you dealing with this? How's it going? There's a lot of things like adolescents tend not to tell their parents just because they have that dynamic of parent-child. They're more open to their friends. But it's just checking in with them and saying, hey, how's it going? I know you had a rough time with insert whatever scenario, and just letting them have the opportunity to talk openly. And then if they do start to express maybe some, maybe not directly saying, I'm thinking about killing myself, but saying more like, I don't want to be here anymore. It's not worth it. I'm a burden. Similar things like that, that is indicative they may be thinking about suicide or having some suicidal ideation. So not being shocked if they bring that to the table and being open and saying, okay, can you tell me more about this, where it might be coming from, what might have caused this, what else is going on? And it's very natural to think, why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you open up to me? But I would advise you to say, I'm sorry you couldn't talk to me sooner. What's going on? Are you comfortable talking to me now? And understanding that maybe in some cases, you're not the right person in that moment, and being able to connect them to some sort of support structure, some sort of professional that can really further that conversation, and not being upset about that, being open to talking about them and getting them the support that they need so that they feel comfortable talking to you in the future about different concerns.
Perfect. And you mentioned something about behavioral signs. What are some of the signs that might tip a parent off that they need to check in with their baby?
So I do want to start off by saying that a lot of these behaviors don't happen in a vacuum. There's a lot of things going on in their lives, a lot of situational things that are out of their control. And so when we're talking about some specific warning signs, first and foremost, if they're talking about suicide, that's a really big red flag. You want to have a conversation around that just to try to follow that thought process, why they're talking about this, where it might have come from. Um, One of the other warning signs that we talk about is if you notice a drastic change in their behavior. If you have an individual who is a lot calmer or a lot more morose type of personality, and suddenly they're really happy about something, as counterintuitive as that seems, that may be a sign that they are thinking about suicide, just because for folks that are dealing with suicidal ideation or having these thoughts, it's a really heavy burden they're carrying. And when they find a solution, they feel relieved. They feel happy. The load is off their shoulders. So that drastic change in behavior can be a sign. Now, you have to look at the bigger context. What else is going on in their lives? Has there been significant changes in their housing, significant changes in some sort of control they may have? So think things like, have they been locked up? Have they been taken away from their support structure? Are they in a completely new environment where they're feeling hopeless? Are they dealing with bullying? And so you have to look at the bigger picture and look at these behaviors and pair them together to really warrant having the conversation, because they're adolescents. They're going to be experiencing mood swings. They're going to be experiencing a lot of difficult behaviors. But it's when you look at the bigger context that can kind of help clue you in on what's going on underneath the surface. And so we have, if there is a previous attempt, that's also a big red flag that there may be a future attempt. And if there is attempt, we do want folks to get into help as soon as possible to prevent that future attempt.
Thank you. All right, let's go to Heather. Heather, will you tell us about Mission 34 and a little bit about your story?
Sure. So I'm Heather Bonner, co-founder of Mission 34, which is a small nonprofit 501c3 based out of Charlotte. And it was formed in memory of my son that died by suicide 5 years ago. He was number 34 on his baseball team at Denison University up in Ohio. And one of the biggest things that we found, because when you've lost somebody and you're totally shocked about it, saw no signs, you go into investigative mode and try to figure out, what did we miss? It's the why torture. And through talking to his friends, who immediately went up to college and started talking to all of them, we started asking, what were the signs? Did you see anything? And we realized that these kids do not have any education about the signs and symptoms to watch for. So what we've done is we've set up chapters, the first one at Denison, and then Miami of Ohio, and now we've got 3 that are starting here at in Charlotte, Davidson College, Queens University, and Elon the next couple months. Is we set up a chapter that's peer-led, so that it's sustainable. It's the kids that are talking about these difficult subjects. And it's made up of anybody who wants to sign up. But because Sean was an athlete, we have a tendency to try to reach out to their athletic department first in order to get buy-in from those athletes. Our tagline is a new type of tough, that it shows strength to ask for help, not weakness, which can very much speak to the athletes. And if we can get buy-in from all the different teams, that hopefully what we teach them and the messages we give them, they'll take it back and share it with their teams. So a chapter is formed. They become a student organization recognized by the school or a club, and it's called a Mission 34 chapter. And we provide everything that they need, all the resources. We have speakers come in. We encourage awareness events, Angelversary Walk in November. My son passed away in November. Around Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in May, we encourage a walk around April or May. As well as, if you're going to be in a chapter, we try to require that you undergo suicide prevention training, or QPR, and get that buy-in from the students. But what's really exciting this year is we rolled out a curriculum for the first time and have gotten great feedback. And it's actually a literal black and red toolbox that has wristbands, stickers, a jar with icebreakers to get a meeting started, as well as a curriculum that addresses 12 weeks. So if they meet every other week, taking into account exams and vacations, they basically meet 12 times. Each session is a specific theme or subject. And after they're done with that, they have a takeaway that they put on a carabiner and hopefully carry on their backpack all year long that has an uplifting quote or a statement that relates back to that lesson. And we're really excited that we've gotten great feedback about that. I'd say that our niche is probably the smaller schools. We find that the Dukes and the UNCs get a lot of resources, and they have the organization and the numbers to be able to do that. And we'll bring speakers into large organizations, but our niche for the chapters are really the smaller schools that might not have those resources available to them, and they can start up a chapter, and it is no cost to the school. It's no cost to the students, unless they want to order a t-shirt at some point for an awareness walk, but that's it. And as a transition is difficult, often from high school to college, it can be a difficult transition from college to the workforce too, especially these kids that have gone through COVID. So we actually have started chapters in cities. We've done 2 events up in Boston, awareness walks. We've brought in speaker 2 years in a row, and now we have chapters starting up following the Angelversary walk that we did last week in Boston, New York, New Jersey, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, and we're hoping for DC and San Diego too. But our biggest thing is that we want to teach the signs and symptoms of these kids so that they might recognize it in themselves and that they'll recognize it in their friends, and to give them the language so that they can ask the questions. So they don't feel uncomfortable about asking, do you have a plan? Are you thinking of harming yourself? And give them the language on how to start that conversation. So that's me.
Thank you so much. Alex, let's jump back to you. Can you, because you, Heather, mentioned QPR. Alex, can you tell us what QPR stands for and what it is?
Sure. So QPR is the short version of Question, Persuade, Refer. This is a suicide prevention and awareness training. The name is a little bit of a play off of CPR, and the message is pretty much the same thing. 3 steps you can take to save a life. You ask the question, you persuade someone to stay alive, and then you refer them to some help. It's not a program where you become someone's therapist on the spot, you become someone's counselor. It's really giving you the tools to have this difficult conversation and then serving as a link to get someone the proper professional help that they need. And the program is, the way I teach it is typically 2 hours, just to try to get some conversation going. It focuses on providing education about suicide, what it is, maybe some statistics. It goes into the process of what it's like to ask the question, gives you some examples. That way you can keep these in your back pocket and use them. The book that you receive actually has the card too. So if at any moment you're blanking on what QPR stands for, what's your next step? It's a tool you can pull out and use. And we try to share those as much as possible, as well as the 988 number. But the program was started back in 1995 with Paul Kinnett. He was the founder. In partnership with Spokane Mental Health. And in 1999, it became its own entity. And since then has continued to offer trainings to just everyday folks. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what your background is, you can become a gatekeeper, as we call them. That is that you went through the QPR training. And there's actual several different versions too. So if you are someone that is working professionally in a clinical area, you have the opportunity to get trained specifically for that. And so it goes through the process of asking the question, what are some ways you can ask the question if you want it more directly, if you want a softer approach. It goes through the indirect and direct clues that can signify that someone is thinking about suicide potentially. You get a little bit of information about non-suicidal self-injury, so NSSIs. And then at the end, you do get the chance to talk to someone about like practicing a little bit of a role play of what it's like to ask the question and persuade someone to stay alive. Because as easy as that sounds, well, actually to me, it doesn't sound easy at all. It sounds very intimidating. And the benefit of the program is it helps you walk through that. It helps you practice with folks who are in the same situation as you, trying to help save a life, whether it's from personal experience or you just want the tools in the case you ever come across someone who may be contemplating suicide. And at the beginning of each training, I always like to say that we do the best that we can with the tools that we have. So when we're coming to this training, it's very easy for folks to think, I saw that. Why didn't I think this way? Why didn't I pick up on these signs? It's so obvious now. In hindsight, it can become obvious. You can start getting through that thought process of, I should have noticed this. I should have said this. But again, we do the best that we can with the tools that we have. And my hope with every training is in the future, should you ever encounter this, you have the confidence that you're making the correct decisions, that you're catching these opportunities to have this conversation and potentially saving a life. And we're, if you do ask the question and they're like, no, why are you talking about that? Then it's just an awkward conversation. It's really awkward and you move past it. But it also shows you're willing to have this conversation. You're willing to meet the person where they're at and not shy away from it. You're not afraid to talk about it. And then again, you have those tools. So in the event something does come up in the future, you are prepared.
So that you kind of describe holding space. Is that what they
Yes,
call it? When you
absolutely.
hold space for someone? Do you want to, Heather, explain what that is?
So I'm not the expert at this table, but
Me neither.
I'm just a mom that changed
Yes.
careers when her son passed away. And I live my life on passion and trying to make change. But to hold the space to me is creating a safe place for someone to be able to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And a lot of that has to do with just listening and being empathetic, asking non-judgmental questions so that you can receive information from them that they wouldn't otherwise share possibly. You put that, you create a space that promotes trust between the two of you. So that's what that means to me.
You said all the right words. Empathy, non-judgmental. That's perfect. Do you have about the same?
But yeah, we really strongly emphasize the non-judgmental part, just because if you are having the worst day of your life, you're in a really dark place and you're opening up to someone who you think may be able to help you, and they right out the gate are starting to judge you or just come off as unhelpful, that can really be detrimental and affect how you reach out to help, or it can push you away from reaching out to help at all. So we really strongly emphasize that non-judgmental approach where you're open. The program does, going back to QPR just a little bit, does give you some tips on how to have this conversation in a private area where they're open to talking. It tells you to wait a little bit before if you want to share any of your personal experiences, because that's also something we want to do when we're establishing like a human connection. It's just put a pause on it, let them have the space, let them have the opportunity to talk, because there's a chance no one has heard them say these words before. You're the first person they're opening up to. And so we want to treat this as a very delicate moment. And again, give them that space to breathe and talk and be open.
Okay, I have a question. I'm going to open up the floor in a minute for you all to ask questions, but I have a question. If someone has, say, attempted suicide before, are there specific programs, and they didn't succeed, are there specific programs for them to get help, and what are they, if there are?
So if someone has attempted,
attempted suicide and they didn't succeed and they want help, are there specific programs to help these people?
I don't know that there's ones that cater specifically to after making an attempt. I know in general, we try to just get folks through the doors of maybe a mental health facility, somewhere where they can talk to someone confident, like open up confidentiality, talk to them about what may be going through, get some support that way.
Okay.
For people who are family members who actually have had someone attempt and complete a suicide, that's I know there's a couple organizations that do have support groups specifically for them.
Okay, perfect.
NAMI is a great
Yes.
resource too. They
Yes.
have these programs to help people that are survivors of suicide
Yes.
or family members that are surviving suicide, have somebody that they've lost. And I'm trying to find a resource for the parents
Yes.
of somebody who's attempted but survived.
Okay.
If anybody knows
That's
of any.
perfect. Yes. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
People want to get information about what you've done.
Oh, you got to hold the microphone. Yeah, there we go. If people want to get information about how to get involved with your agency and your nonprofit, how would they do that?
Wanna go first?
Sure. So to get engaged with the Kellogg Foundation, it's really simple. We have an online referral form you can fill out and submit, or you can give us a call and just say that you want to start services. We have a screening process that we go through. And since we are grant and donation funded, the majority of our services are completely free. So in that screening process, we just determine, okay, you fall under this grant, so all your services are paid. And then they do the intake. But it's pretty simple. And we try to keep that process simple. So to remove any and all barriers that we can to prevent people from getting support.
It's pretty easy for us. Mission34.org. It has all the information on what we do, has resources that we recommend for someone that might be in crisis. And there's a contact so you can reach out and it'll be me. But any information we love, as we're growing, we're looking for more volunteers. As we're spreading to new colleges, we're looking for people to be involved and spread the word. But mission34.org. And because our target audience really is 18 to 34-year-olds, we have an Instagram. I hate social media, but it's how to reach these kids. So that's Mission34 SPB, which are my son's initials, Sean Paul Bonner.
So when you're looking for the college campus startups, are you looking for a student who's currently in the college, or would a recent grad or like an adult in that situation?
So we're looking for current students. However, I know that alumni have been facilitators to get something going. Normally, in order to become an official club, you have to have a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. We require that there's a social media person, an events planner, so that it really tailors to that particular group. But ideally for the sustainability, we want it to be peer or student started, student led. Mhm. Mhm. Thank you.
So this may be a difficult question for you to answer, but I figured I'd throw it out there anyway. I am a suicide survivor. I have a 9-year-old that was affected by that. Beyond therapy, do you have any suggestions for how to navigate the conversations and questions that he has for me?
So I think first and foremost, being really open to receiving those questions, understanding that it may hit home too, since you have that experience. So letting them ask any and all questions. And if there's a response that you don't know or you don't have any information on, being saying, I don't know, but I can find out, or let's find out together. There's no cookie cutter way to have that conversation. If I'm being honest, it really just depends on how your child conceptualizes certain things. And they may be curious about it. They may be afraid. And so just kind of understanding where they're coming from and catering to that. So they are afraid, providing information so they're not, and they understand why this may have happened.
I think it's also good to show your vulnerability.
Yeah.
That if you're crying, it enables them to ask further questions so that you can talk about feelings and hopefully put down the barriers that they might have about expressing their own.
And that really sets the way for them to open up. If they have any concerns in the future or are dealing with issues, they have the space to be vulnerable.
Thank you.
Hola, hi, good afternoon. I have a question, Alex, for you. What do you think about the 988 number? You were mentioning something about it. And what is your impact that you see with the community? For you, Heather, of course, we are not going to have a training here, but if we see that we have a regular relation with our children, our youth, as a parent, as a counselor, how do you think that we need to act from now to the following days, every month, have a talk or something else, like we can figure out, don't miss those signals that you were mentioning. And for both of you, here, all of us, we are dealing with youth, but there is a first aid mental health for youth or for adults. How do you think that we can encourage all of those who are working with these communities to take these kind of trainings that are basics, but essential because they give you like a overview of how to act. Thank you.
Okay. So I share the 988 number as much as possible with any and everyone who was willing to hear me talk about it, just because it's so the number is so easy to memorize. Since we do work with a lot of youth, I am constantly ordering the little business cards and stickers. I pass them out during trainings as much as possible, informational flyers all about 988, just because it's such a great tool. And folks who use it, it doesn't necessarily have to be about suicide. It can just be emotional distress, and you can talk to someone on that line, and they can connect you with local resources too. So it's a good number to have if you're not immediately already connected to services, or if you can't get to the services just yet. Here's something you can do in the meantime to kind of help buffer while you get to like therapy or something.
We create these cards that are tailored for each college that we're in. On one side, it shows the signs and symptoms of somebody that might be struggling. If they have it on their dashboard or their mirror or on their phone, the more they see it, the more familiar they become, and hopefully the language becomes a little easier. On the backside, we tailor it to college so that we have the resources. We'll always have the National Suicide Hotline, text line, as well as 988, but we try to also consider adding, with the school's permission, the resources that they have on campus. In order to start a conversation with our youth, I think it's important to create a safe place on a consistent basis, you know, whether it's around the kitchen table or coming home from school. The language that we have started using is associating not just your physical health, but your mental health. So when these kids come home from school, you ask, oh, how was your day? And you get a one-word answer versus, how are you feeling physically? Did you have a nice day? You know, how are you feeling? Open-ended questions. But the big one we added was, how are you feeling from the neck up? And hopefully that will become a normal question for them, and you can have that grow into a closer communication about how they're really doing. But learning those signs and symptoms and referring to different resources that give you actual examples of questions to ask, I think is really good. Yeah. And I can't remember the last question.
It was about mental health first aid trainings.
Oh, yeah. So in colleges, we deal with colleges mostly. I think that every administrator, teacher, coach should undergo QPR training. I've probably taken it, I don't know, 12 times, but I've also taken the mental health first aid, both the adolescent and the adult. I think teachers should take those too. Coaches should take that too. A minimal, they should know how to ask the questions and work through them feeling uncomfortable about having them, because those kids reach out to them. They're people on campus that are adults. QPR training, I wish, any type of suicide prevention training, I wish every single person would take that, because you will learn to see the signs and symptoms that we did not see before Sean died, and to be able to recognize that so much more now, that you can step up and ask questions in order to really help them. Mm-hmm.
And I am an instructor in both the youth and adult mental health first aid curriculum, and I try to sell it as much as possible. I'm totally in agreement. Everyone and anyone should take these trainings bare minimum, just so they have the tools in case they see someone who is in the beginning stages of developing a mental health or substance use concern, in the worsening signs, and then that crisis stage too. Mm-hmm. And those who may be unfamiliar with the mental health first aid program, it's a 5-step action plan that you can implement when you believe that someone may be dealing with some mental health or substance use concerns. It can be applied across the board. So while someone is having those early signs to when someone is actively in crisis, and it goes through how to identify those signs, how to have that conversation, and what steps you can take afterwards.
Great. Thank you, Heather. I love you saying that. how do you feel from the neck up? I'm
Mhm.
going to start using that. I had a question. So you probably see a lot of numbers and statistics. How is social media affecting our youth as far as suicide rates? Because I'm sure ever since social media has come into the picture that the rates have gone up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So it's social media. What we see is a lot of, so you have like a celebrity death that happens, and obviously that gets pushed out to everyone. And in the program, you actually we get taught a little bit about something called the contagion effect, where it's essentially when you have a high profile suicide, what it does is it inspires adolescents who are already having difficulties with their mental or behavioral health to then make an attempt. And so I believe, like with social media, because that becomes more readily available, and then certain social media apps will cater to that. If you're consuming that kind of media, will feed you more of that media. So then you're just getting this negative feedback loop of constantly getting this potentially harming material. So I honestly, I do believe it has probably contributed.
Do we have any more questions out in the audience?
So Heather, this question is directed to you. I have 2 kids. I have a boy and a girl. And I couldn't imagine losing either of them. So how does a family repair and move on when something terrible like that is thrown on you and you're traumatized?
It's really difficult. It's been 5 years. Sorry. Each family member deals with it differently. My life is Mission 34, to help others, to educate others the best that I can. My husband has a full-time job, and he's in a very different stage than I am. I never went through anger. I went through sorrow. He's goes through, anger that this happened. Why did this happen to us? I turn more to the faith and belief that I'll see him again. Our whole family believes in counseling. So we all see counselors except for my daughter, who saw one for a little while. Thank you. And now she's an ER doctor, and she ends up being the front lines of crisis coming in the doorway. My son has just gotten dealt the wrong cards. He was a senior when COVID hit. He missed his senior spring, and then he started college behind a computer screen. And that isolation and the FOMO, or seeing what you're missing out because of social media, has been a really hard thing for him. And he has dealt with, it's not diagnosed depression, but it sure seems like it. And he doesn't have the structure that he had in high school. He lost his sport when he got to college. And that lack of structure has been detrimental. We recognize that. So we're not sure if he's going to be making it through college, or if he's just going to find a different path, which is absolutely fine, as long as he finds something joyful in whatever he wants to do. I see a therapist regularly. I have dealt with, and I've seen it in my husband too, we get trauma brain, where I have memory loss. I don't remember the first year after he died. I kept a journal. Unfortunately, I lost it. So many people I came in contact with and helped me and offered me assistance. I don't know who they are because they were in that journal I lost. And that's an ongoing battle. That's a different kind of therapy, EMDR, which is having to do with eye movement and really digging deep into the trauma, which is exhausting. But I've just tried to take the steps to repair myself. We all have bad days, especially the anniversaries are hard. But we just try to go on and hopefully answer questions and be there for whoever needs help, whether it's the parent of a child that's suffering or somebody that's lost a child, because it's a terrible club. But we speak from experience. And we have from day one been a very open book about this. So I'm happy to talk about the signs and symptoms that we now see after the fact, and what we can do to make it not happen again. And that's the goal, is to eliminate suicide. But we know that's, very hard to do. So we just try it one chapter at a time. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So Alex, we talked about the social media. What about the isolation? You mentioned isolation too. How is that affecting people to the point where they're so depressed or so down that they're thinking about suicide? And what can we do to help with that?
Yeah, so first and foremost, COVID was a traumatic event for everyone. Even though some people don't think of it that way, it was collective trauma for the entire world. And what we're seeing now is the side effects of that isolation that we were all put through, where you potentially lost your job, potentially lost a loved one, and was not able to see them on their deathbed. It was a significantly traumatic event. And so with the isolation that comes from that, you do see a lot of adolescents that have lost these huge milestones in their life, going to their prom, celebrating college parties, like just being able to live in their adolescent life. These things were taken from them. And so part of that does cause that isolation. And now what we're seeing is limited outside activities where they can go out and engage. It's just not happening anymore. There's a term I've been seeing a lot on social media called the loss of third spaces, where you have opportunities to just hang out. These are being limited now. And so you don't have these spaces where you don't have to pay for things. You don't have to go somewhere. You can just be. And so when you have an age, the adolescent group that went through COVID at such a delicate stage, and now all their communication is behind a screen, that is very isolating and can contribute to developing behavioral and mental health concerns. And then what it also does is it limits who you can reach out to, because now you're stuck behind the screen, or you don't know who to reach out to, or you're just losing that human to human connection.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? We've got a few more minutes. Would love to get a few more questions in for our speakers. I see one up down there, Royce.
So you addressed about social media in regards to a popular star, someone taking their life and them youth modeling that. We're living in an age where social media is everywhere. Whether you want to be part of it or not, you pretty much have to be just to keep up with things.
Mm-hmm.
So my question or my regards is, you did not address the thing on the bullying, the, what else could I say there? Not only bullying, but just the wanting to fit in. And so they're seeing on social media, their friends are doing it, so they want to do it. They can't get involved for X, Y, Z because of that. Now they are saying, I don't want to live anymore. In my community, we just had a 10-year-old take their life, found him in a closet. Okay. Why would a 10-year-old, and I'm not asking you to address this, I'm just saying social media wise, but why would a 10-year-old want to die? Okay. So social media wise, people are on there, they're seeing this. And now when they see this, now they're like, okay, what do we do? How do we address this? Because this is everywhere. I mean, this isn't just North Carolina. This is the US. This is the world. We're seeing people, TikTok has become so huge. And now they're following, well, somebody did this. Selfies are killing more people than anything else right now. It's just mind blowing to see this. So just what's y'all's take on the social media aspect, not in watching the pop star, but just watching their peers?
That was the other piece, that bullying component, where you potentially can be bullied by your peers, and that bullying can be so extreme that you do have cases where adolescents, young children are taking their lives just because what they're facing on a day-to-day basis. There's no escape. Again, you have to use social media to keep up with what's going on, to keep up with your peers. And so there's very little escape. A lot of people say, oh, just turn off the computer, just walk away. But when you're in a culture that's so kind of wrapped up in social media, there really is no escape. And I know there's a lot of push on social media sites to implement greater guidelines, greater moderation, just so these things don't happen, but they continue to happen just because people find ways around the rules. and then they are continuing to bully one another to the point someone does die. So that is a very, very difficult thing.
So we used to be able to go home after school and be at home. You wouldn't know what people are doing outside. You wouldn't know what you're missing out on. You wouldn't know what parties you weren't invited to. And we don't have that anymore. It's just constantly in our face. And a lot of it has to do, I've learned, is these algorithms that they have with social media, where whoever out there in social media land goes in and tracks what you're looking at, and it just feeds it. So if you see somebody who's lost a little weight and you ask a question about dieting, the next thing you know, there's constantly information, how to lose 10 pounds in a week, how to get this size, and that's creating eating disorders. So I do know from another panel that I did that there is a junior at UNC Chapel Hill who's working with higher ups, maybe in the legislative level, that are working to limit these algorithms that are being created to, my feeling, they're predators on children and feeding into it. So hopefully there are steps being taken to limit that and to protect our children better. But it is definitely a factor on mental health.
Heather, so when you experience this with your son, what are some things that your friends or family would say to you that was comforting? Because sometimes people don't know what to say to people that have experienced what you've experienced. So what are some of the things that were said to you or done for you that were comforting and helped you through the process? Sorry.
First off, I think the number one thing that we don't like is for somebody to walk by and not address it at all, not look in our eyes, pass us by like, you know, the stigma still exists and they don't have the courage to even say, I'm sorry. You know, I cry at a drop of a hat, especially if somebody else is going through trauma. I start crying too. But you need to acknowledge it. So I think that was probably the best help, is just people, even if they don't know what to say, just to come over, give us a hug, tell us they're sorry. I'd say more people than not said, there are no words. I don't know what to say. And that's okay. That's really okay.
So Alex, do you have suggestions for people that want to support and comfort someone that's gone through this, a parent that's gone through this? Do you have suggestions of what to say?
Yeah, just going off the same message, acknowledge it. If you've gone through something major in your life, something super traumatic, and people don't acknowledge it, it's pretty much dehumanizing. You don't even see me. You can't even say you're sorry. You can't acknowledge my pain, my distress. And so one of the things we do say is just acknowledge it and say that you're sorry. Say that you see their pain and you're so sorry this has happened to them, and there's anything you can do. We are big on asking people, what can I do for you? What do you need in this moment? And not making assumptions, just so you are actually being helpful.
Also, when you lose someone, having people remember that you lost them like a year later or on their birthday is comforting.
Any more questions out there? We have just a few minutes left. One more question? Okay, we have time for one more question. This young lady, right?
Mike is intimidating. So what would you say to help the younger population? Because I know that you said that you do outreach to colleges, but my work is majority with schools and, you know, DSS and things like that. And suicide is one of those curse words, like sex abuse. And we all know that it happens and parents don't necessarily want to talk about it. And it's also a new law out now that, you know, in order for you to talk about certain topics, you have to get parental support in order to do those things. So how do you talk to, again, like a lower level, middle school, high school, because we know it happens there too, and raise awareness about suicide without having to feel like that you're walking on eggshells? Because now, in my personal opinion, they seem more reactive instead of preventative. And that's like a huge barrier that I feel like we have now.
So we don't go in middle schools or high schools. But we know of organizations that are trying to take the parents actually out of it, to encourage kids to talk amongst their peers about good decisions and recognizing when somebody's in crisis and or just not having a good day, and being able to give them the language to ask questions and to have those conversations. You're dealing with a lot of different feelings and being uncomfortable and the vulnerability around it, that the younger you can get in to talk to these kids, the better. So educating those elementary teachers, creating a space or a time in a school day to have a sit around on the carpet and have a discussion about your feelings. The earlier we can get into these kids' minds that they're in a safe space talking about their feelings, the better. It's just my suggestion.
What we try to do is actually bring in parents and try to just provide education around the subject. That way they're more comfortable with it, or at least give them just a teeny tiny bit of information that they can keep. And so if something does happen, if they do notice some signs, some behavioral changes, they're not afraid to have that conversation, or at least they know where to guide their child to get some support. But it is really difficult when you do get folks who are more reactive or who shut down completely if you even talk about mental health at all. We do try to empower our youth to reach out to an adult that they trust. If it's not their parent, maybe someone else that they can open up to and then get some resources through there. But it is really difficult because for younger kids, the parent is in control. There's not much they can do on their own.
Thank you, Heather. Alex, can we give them a round of applause? Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
We're grateful to all our presenters. Jim is going to come up and have a few last words.
Should we go?
Thank you so much. Just another round of applause. Thank you. Tough, very tough conversation, but a conversation that we need to have.
Mhm.
Okay.